Okay, I'm not going to go to that, but today's feature presentation is called Getting Comfortable with ICESat Height Data and the Open Altimetry Online Tool. And with us today is Amy FitzGerrell from the user services team of the National Snow and Ice Data Center, which is also, called NSIDC, that's the acronym, in Boulder, Colorado. And let me tell you why NSIDC, okay? And as you can see here, as you know, ICESat collects this elevation data from across the planet. Well, this data comes from the satellite. It's downlinked to Earth, as you can see here. It's reformatted, checked for quality, repackaged into scientific data sets, delivered to NSIDC, who then distributes it and archives this ICESat data, because there is a lot of data coming from this satellite. So, NSIDC is great. They worked with us with ICESat 1, and there's a lot of other missions and campaigns that they work with. So, Amy will make you comfortable in looking at this open altimetry online tool by talking about how do you look at the ICESat height data, how do you look at the globe data, and then do some comparisons and find some coincidental overpasses, things like that. So, Amy, I will pass it over to you, and thank you in advance for this. Oh, I should mention that also at the end we will have time for some question and answers. So thank you, Amy, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Brian. I will share my screen here.
Let me unshare mine here.
Okay.
Yep, there you go. All good.
Alrighty. As Brian mentioned, I work with the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Boulder, Colorado, where it's currently about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, a little over 4 degrees Celsius, and sunny. I am going to sort of buzz through my introduction to open altimetry and getting around using the data that's archived in this tool. Really quickly, open altimetry is the product of a collaboration between the National Snow and Ice Data Center, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and the San Diego Supercomputer Center at UC San Diego. It was a custom-built application to meet discovery, access, and visualization needs of data from NASA's ICESat and ICESat missions. Today, I'll be focusing on the ICESat data and how it relates to data collected for the Trees Around the Globe campaign. Specifically, we'll be honing in more on the ICESat Atlas Level 3A land and vegetation height dataset, which is also known as ATL-08. So briefly, I'll switch into about the ICESat mission, as Brian touched on as well. The primary instrument is called the Advanced Topographic Laser Altimeter System, also known as ATLAS, which is a photon counting laser. It's one laser, but it's split into 6 beams. I'll zoom in a little bit here to show you that beam pattern. So it's got 3 weak and strong pairs. You can get a quick glimpse of which are weak and strong by using the Select Beams button here. I'll go over the tools more thoroughly, but just a quick intro to talk to the instrument. Atlas takes measurements every 70 centimeters along the satellite's ground path, and it has a footprint of about 13 meters diameter. The beam pairs are spaced 3.3 kilometers apart, with a distance of 90 meters between each weak and strong beam. So you zoom in a little closer here, you can see the spacing. ICESat repeats its ground tracks every 91 days to allow scientists to track height changes in all 4 seasons. The land and vegetation height dataset, ATL-08, contains along track heights above the WGS-84 ellipsoid for ground and contains ground and canopy surface information. The ground and canopy surfaces are processed in fixed 100-meter data segments So what you'll see in Open Altimetry are the approximate midpoints of the 100-meter data segment, where the terrain and canopy statistics for that segment are reported. So currently, that's what you're looking at here if we, as we zoom around on my screen and are looking at these data points. I'll put a slide up at the end of this webinar with links to the NASA spec sheet for the ICESat-2 instrument and to NSIDC's gateway for ICESat-2 data access and the documentation, so that anyone interested in diving more deeply into ICESat-2, ATL08, or the other ICESat-2 data sets archived at NSIDC, you can grab those links and do that. So now I'll introduce the Open Altimetry web application as a whole. To get going on that, we'll first introduce the reset button. So this resets you back out to sort of your home view. As you can see, there's a calendar option to choose different days of data. We've got a cloud layer button, which is actually the MODIS True Color Terra Corrected Reflectance layer. This can be helpful in areas to determine why you might see a ground track, but sometimes the data fall out and aren't available. And one of the primary reasons for seeing a lack of data where you see a ground track is due to cloud cover. The laser doesn't penetrate clouds well. You can also zoom to a bounding box or a point. I'll do a quick demonstration here of zooming to a point. So you punch in your longitude and latitude, click on the update map, and what that's done is actually centered the map to that point. So it doesn't add a graphic. If you want to zoom in, actually, I'm not sure it's centered. Actually, it probably did. I've got the clouds layer on blocking my view. So knowing that it doesn't zoom into that point or add a graphic, but you can then you can manually use the zoom button to get in and know that that coordinate, there's a coordinate readout here in the lower left, is about where your cursor is hovering. You can also turn on the reference ground track layer. These, when they're this pink color, are the inactive but present tracks that have data. If I click on one of those tracks, it'll show the dates where data are available. And if I click on that down here in the lower left again, it also updates the map to show what the currently selected date with data are being displayed in the map. I'll turn that off. Over here in the upper right-hand part of the map, you can see that we have a number of different layer options to turn on. Again, I'll focus on ATL08 today, but there's also ATL06, which is our land ice height data set. We have ATL07 and 10, which are sea ice height and sea ice freeboard data sets, and ATL12, which is our ocean elevation data set. The last tools I'll introduce here are, let's see, we have the ability to change the current map view's projection. So we have the Arctic polar projection, regular geographic, and Antarctic polar projection. There's also an information button, which this goes into detail about the some of the layer details, what comprises the background layers, the data products, a beam legend. And lastly, I'll show the annotation option. If I turn these on, you can see across the map where people have added annotations for points of interest or potentially problems they found in the data. So this is a good reporting tool. If you think you're seeing a data anomaly, you can add an annotation, search it for a small area, and it allows you to change whether you're looking at a data anomaly or if it's an annotation for yourself, a surface feature of interest. So you can sort of dial in annotations, and they'll persist in the map as either public or private, depending on the box you check, to help you get back to where you were. So what I'm going to do here is I've added an annotation that I'm going to search for. I called it globe. So this is where I found an area where we've got ATL08 data that overlie that coincide fairly closely with a citizen science contributed point from the globe advanced data access tool that I found in Sweden. So if I click on my annotation, you can see the details that I added for this. So I'll close that for now. I'm going to open up Google Earth really quickly and just show you. This is where I use Google Earth to plot the coordinates of the citizen science contributed point. So this is, I've just added a screen grab of the line item for this site here. So that's what it looks like plotted in Google Earth. So close that. I'll keep this up for a bit. So that data point lies roughly over here. So it's relatively close to the ATL08 data. If I expand, or if I click on one of these points, I can get the snapshot of the latitude, longitude, and the elevation at this point. What you may notice is there's a couple of things going on. As I mentioned earlier, the ATL08 data are being reported as aggregated data over a 100-meter segment. So this point isn't necessarily really the exact height of a tree in this area, but it is, if we were in an area with sort of a continuous forest, it would be the continuous height approximately over that 100-meter segment. And so I'm having to make some assumptions that in this neighborhood, the tree heights are possibly similar across this subdivision if they were planted at the same time, and should reasonably reflect what this citizen science collected at the point that's over here. But it isn't an exact art, and it's the best we have for the time being. The ATL03, which is the geolocated photon data, is the underlying data, and I can show you that in a little bit. That is unclassified, whereas the ATL08 has been classified into canopy height and terrain elevation. And so the background noise and errant photons have been cleaned out to report just the data and other important parameters that you would potentially be interested in. So another thing that you might notice is that this elevation for the satellite data of ATL08 is reported at 73.9 meters, whereas the citizen scientists have reported that the elevation at this site was 37.6 meters. And this is because Atlas is reported in as a measurement reference to the WGS 84 ellipsoid height, whereas the terrain height being reported from the Globes app appears to be what's called orthometric height, which is sort of your land height in the area where you are relative to sea level. So I've got a quick graphic that I'll show. It's a brief explanation of why we're seeing a difference in elevation, but there's also, I've got a geoid height calculator that you can use to run through the routine of showing whether you're on track or not. What I've done is used, let me show you that really quickly. It's the UNAVCO GeoHeight calculator. This is one of the links I'll include at the end of my presentation. It lets you punch in the latitude and the longitude and the GPS elevation. So these are going to be the coordinates from the ATL08 data. When I submit this, it spits out what my the GPS ellipsoidal height is. We knew that was the elevation I input, and it calculates the geoid height at 36.7 meters. Orthometric height is calculated by subtracting the geoid height from the GPS ellipsoid height. So this 37.25 meters is the approximate orthometric height in this area, which again goes back to my diagram here of how it actually matches reasonably well with what the citizen scientist had measured. The canopy heights in ATL08 are reported as a difference between the canopy photon height and the estimated terrain surface. So you don't have to worry about any conversion in the tree height reported here. Over this 100-meter segment, the tree height was calculated to be about 4.5 meters, which it coincides roughly with the tree height calculated, but it won't be exact because this person calculated the exact height of a very specific tree that isn't directly in line with the ATL08 orbit track. Well, the ICESat-2 orbit track collecting ATL08 data. So another functionality that you have within Open Altimetry is, I'm going to scooch this over a little bit. If I use the Select a Region tool, and this allows me to view the elevation profile over this area. And so this is what you also saw. I kind of cheated and gave you a preview in my geoid height calculation summary. But you can see how on the map over here, the blue dot is highlighted as I move my cursor along the graph of the weak and the strong beams over here. So this is just the surface elevation area being reported, and then the canopy heights are reported in the graph below here for all these points. And not every point qualifies to necessarily return a canopy height. There are restrictions in terms of the number of photons that need to be received and but in the processing of the data before a canopy height can be generated. So you will sometimes see a little data gap. And this is where, if I switch to the ATL03 photon heights, you can see the data returned here. But again, these are high confidence, but we still don't have a classification to know whether these are necessarily backscatter or noise. We can't tell whether this is a canopy versus the terrain. And that's what ATL03 has done the extensive processing to classify and give us a relative confidence of what we're looking at for any given beam. So lastly, I'll touch on how to get the data. If you click this download data as a CSV, that will do a quick download of all the data, again, located just within the select a region. So it's subsetted to be the data contained within this area. And if you choose, excuse me, the second option is to download the data subsetted in HDF5 format. And that will be delivered from NSIDC to you to use as you choose. Lastly, there are some options within these little hamburger icon to fiddle with your chart view. You can download a PNG image or other images of this exact chart in different formats. So that's about it for my presentation. Like I say, that was kind of a quick and dirty overview of getting around in Open Altimetry. Here's my I'll pop this up quickly. This is, if you have any questions, either about using Open Altimetry that you'd like more help with, please feel free to email NSIDC@nsidc.org. We have more than just me on the user services staff, but I'm the one who primarily answers either Open Altimetry or ICESat2 data questions. And we're more than happy to answer any questions you have. This is the link to some of the technical specs for the ICESat2 instrument. That's where you can see like the footprint diameter, the beam pattern, description, that sort of thing. And then this link this brings you to the overview page for all of the ICESat2 data that we archive at NSIDC, but also lets you go in by individual data sets to choose ATLOA to look at the user guide or the technical references, so you can get a better feel for the processing that's been applied to the data to generate the final output product. And lastly, this is the link to the UNAVCO site. If anyone's interested in the geoid height calculator, it is handy if you're looking at orthometric heights versus ellipsoidal heights. It does help demystify why there can seem like a sizable difference, but it's just taken into account the undulation of the geoid across the planet in different regions. So that's it from me.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. So with the presentation, what I suggest is that those of you who want to, really, take a look with your students, or if you're a researcher or if you're a citizen scientist, really go into the, to the online tool, to the Open Altimetry online tool, and play around with it, and then also go back and rewatch Amy's presentation once it's archived, and it'll be archived by tomorrow sometime. Once it's done recording, it takes a little while for Zoom to let me know that it's actually there and ready to be grabbed and archived. So, take a look at the presentation again, get a feel for what Open Altimetry does, and as Amy mentioned, you're not always going to get maybe you measured only one tree. Okay, and I'm going to reinforce this. You measure one tree. ICESat2 may not hit that exact tree. Okay, there's a good chance it won't, but there's a chance it will. Okay, but here's where we go to something called, and I say it probably during most webinars, something called data density. Okay, and one thing that's great about data density is it provides an easier way to do comparisons between the GLOBE data and the ICESat2 data. And so that data density, what that means is if you're in an area where there's lots of trees, if you're in an area that has lots of trees in a small location, get as many of those tree height observations as you can. So then there'd be a better chance that ICESat2 is going to hit that location. So, data density, more data for the students to use, for the citizen scientists, more data for researchers, and then more data to potentially be able to compare using this Open Altimetry tool. So, yeah, the whole data density thing is super important. And, we stress this, often during these webinars, that we really want to have those multiple measurements at the same location. Like if you're in a grove of trees, if you happen to be walking through the woods or, the forest, and you're able to observe the base and the top of the tree clearly and be able to walk to it, get measurements of each one of those tree heights. So then if you have, say you have, in a 100 meter square space, you have the height measurements of 20 or 30 trees. That's amazing. That's good data density there. So I will open it up to questions now. The first question, and this is for you, Amy, and there's a couple things in the chat about it, but what geoid is used in the calculation?
So this is it's ITRF 20, I want to say 2014 reference frame, and the WGS 84 ellipsoid. But in case that's not touching on the exact answer that the user is hoping for, I'm happy to get back with the user if that's possible. Let me So I don't think right off the top of my tongue I've got that handy.
Okay.
I was going to point out one thing really quickly. If you're trying to predict where ICESat-2 might overpass your area, if you're curious, that's what turning on the reference ground track layer can be really handy. So if you're going to take a group of people out on a field trip, you could actually target being within the range of one of these reference ground tracks potentially if it coincides with your local region, and you could potentially build a field trip around that and get a number of tree heights in an area close to where you live, and wait to see if data are either already exist or will roll in over the years that ICESat-2 is up and running. So that's my quick digression there.
So yeah, so you're able to, and I don't know if you can do this like live while we're popping up here, but if you go to the area, there's a latitude longitude finder. So as the participants know, from Globe, that each one of the trees that they take a measurement of, it is geolocated. They get a latitude and longitude from the trees. So it's from the tree that they're measuring. So in Open Altimetry, there is a latitude longitude box, and potentially you could put in, correct, Amy, you could put in the latitude and longitude of that tree,
Yes.
For instance, all right. And then, you'll be able to see, where, I guess the counter will pop up then, and then you can see, if ICESat-2, if a track went over that specific location, like when, and,
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what I did. I downloaded the data from the ADAT tool and just started punching in latitude, longitudes till I found one that was reasonably close to an ICESat-2 overpass already to use in this demo. Easier said than done, as it turns out, but I found one.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Brian. It's Valerie. May I add something? We're working on an app for smartphones to be able to plug in your latitude, longitude, or your zip code or your location in order to see where and when an ICESat-2 track may be passing nearby your location, and that hopefully will be out by beginning of next year, and we'll let Brian know about it so he can pass it along to all of you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Valerie.
And while we're here, I have a quick response to the first question that was launched. In that for the geoid height, it's that information I found in the ATL03 user guide. It would be in the ATL03 algorithm theory by ATBD, which I'm forgetting the acronym for now. It's data brain, algorithm theoretical basis documentation. But for the basis of the inputs to all of these higher level products, it would be the EGM 2008 geoid. But it would depend on whether that may or may not be applied. So I know some of the data sets like ATL 13, which is sort of an early release for us, has an orthometric height listed as one of the parameters, as well as the ellipsoid height. But all of, I think the bulk of the other data sets like ATL08 are only reporting in that ellipsoid height. So you'd have to calculate the geoid height using the EGM 2008 geoid.